I leave office as Prime Minister of Australia with our nation prouder and stronger and more prosperous than it has been.
Exit stage right, bring on the left. Australia rejects John Howard after 11 years. Good evening. More than a decade of Conservative rule in Australia is over. John Howard, so recently unassailable, is struggling to save even his own seat as the country embraces Kevin Rudd, a centre-left, Mandarin-speaking former diplomat. Also tonight, they're heading home, but questions gather about ship safety as the MS Explorer sinks in the pristine Antarctic waters. Inside the West Bank, in the run-up to US peace talks, we're in Nablus as the Fatah party desperately tries to make a difference to government and security. And the museum built on hope and optimism. Greece might not yet have the Elgin marbles back in their home, but that hasn't stopped them building a brand new museum for when that day dawns.
In the sports headlines tonight, Steven Gerrard does what he couldn't do for England this week, skippering Liverpool to a resounding victory. They beat Newcastle 3-0 at St James's Park. In Scotland, Rangers see off lowly Falkirk, but Celtic stay top of the league. And in the inaugural Prince William Cup in Cardiff, Rugby World Champion South Africa gave the Welsh a thorough mauling.
Well, now, for 11 years he dominated Australian politics, but now the country's voters have swept John Howard from power. He's conceded defeat to the Labour Party. Their leader, Kevin Rudd, will be the next Prime Minister. Mr Howard had served 11 years in the top job after 4 straight election victories. Now, to add insult to injury, he's battling to hang on to his own seat, with the votes in his Bennelong constituency still being counted. Andrew Thomas is in Sydney.
It was a comprehensive victory. The leader of a new generation of Australians taking the reins.
Today, Australia has looked to the future. Today, the Australian people have decided that we as a nation will move forward. To plan for the future, to prepare for the future, to embrace the future, and together, as Australians, to unite and write a new page in our nation's history.
Labour, under new leader Kevin Rudd, in power after over 11 years of Liberal Party rule. John Howard, Australia's most successful politician of modern times and key ally of President Bush, dumped not only from government, but from his own seat.
I want to thank the Australian people for the privilege that they have given me over that period of time. I respect it and I honour it, and it's something that has really been the most unbelievable experience.
The Labour campaign had the professionalism of Tony Blair's in 1997, a clear message that it was now safe to change to Labour. They enlisted the help of celebrities, a former television news anchor, to fight Howard's Sydney seat. Though the Prime Minister appeared to be making some gains as the campaign wore on, his final week was derailed by a scandal. Party members faking letters purporting to show Islamic extremists backing Labour. Early morning queues outside polling stations suggested people were keen to make a point. The key seats being watched, marginals in Sydney and Brisbane. As the first results came in, it was clear the swing to Labour was on. Celebrations at the camp of former Midnight Oil rocker Peter Garrett, likely now to be made Australia's Environment Minister.
The Australian people have effectively resolved that, notwithstanding that the government had maintained some period of economic buoyancy, that their other deficiencies were so great that they ought to be thrown out of office.
At what was fast becoming his political wake, the question was not whether Howard could retain government, but whether he could retain his own seat. The mood subdued. It was an ignominious end to a political career marked by remarkable success. 4 election victories, an Australian economy that's barely paused for breath. Low unemployment, a boom in mineral exports, the union subdued. But he was a controversial leader, his closeness to President Bush and wholehearted commitment to the war in Iraq proving deeply unpopular at home. Howard also a supporter of the American position on climate change, Australia, the only other developed country to refuse to ratify Kyoto, despite a near-decade-long drought that's crippling farmers and is increasingly blamed on global warming. On immigration too, Howard shot from the hip, his victory in 2001's election due in part to a tough stance regarding a boatload of illegal immigrants prevented from docking on the Australian mainland. Constitutionally, Howard was a monarchist, allowing a referendum in 1999, but ensuring the replacement to the Queen proposed, a politically appointed president, proved too much for the Australian people to stomach. The coming man, a Mandarin-speaking former diplomat, campaigned on maintaining Howard's economic success while smoothing government at the edges. Controversial industrial relations laws will go, Australian troops will soon leave Iraq, Kyoto will be signed, a new referendum on republicanism is likely.
So 11 years of Liberal Party rule ends. John Howard has been beaten nationally by a man who's only been leader of the opposition 12 months and looks likely to be beaten in his own constituency by a television journalist who only stood, many thought, as a political gimmick. It marks a remarkable change of fortunes for the politician who once had the golden touch. Tonight ends his political career. It also marks a distinct shift in where Australians see their future. Andrew Thomas, Channel 4 News, Sydney.
Well, joining me here is Paul Smith, who's president of the Australian Labor Party abroad. Paul, thanks for being with us. Andrew Thomas making the point there that Australians certainly wanted to make a point to John Howard. What was the main point, do you think?
The main point they wanted to make is that they expect an Australian government to guarantee fairness and the Australian concept of a fair go. What John Howard did was, in the last 12 months, he brought in what's called work choices. That's an attack on people's rights at work, their right to holidays, security, fairness, and the right to be a member of a union. And the Australians wouldn't stomach that, and that's why he lost his seat and has lost government.
Even though the economy was so good, the boom continued.
But people expect not only a strong economy, but fairness for working families. The only Australian other Prime Minister to lose his seat was Stanley Melbourne Bruce in 1929, the only other Conservative to attack the Australian idea of a fair go at work. And if you want to be an Australian Prime Minister, you don't extract the rights of workers. The only two have lost their seats because they've done so.
Right, so your boss, your man, people think Australia centre-left. Is he a Republican?
Yes, he's a Republican and he's an internationalist, and I think he's an experienced diplomat who I think will make Australia a positive force in the world by citing Kyoto, getting troops out of Iraq, looking for multinational solutions to international problems.
And as a Republican will no doubt want to take Australia in a more Republican direction. Kiss goodbye to the Queen.
Yes, but that won't happen in a hurry. I think that there are much more important pressing issues about domestic issues, that actually the issues that won him the election. It's fairness at work and housing issues, issues about the economy, giving fairness to working families. They're the people that put Kevin Rudd into power, and I'm sure they'll be his first priorities.
Right, other big priority for all of us on this little planet, the environment. He's going to sign up to Kyoto, this we know. Will he go to Bali?
Well, certainly Kevin Rudd is committed to a much more comprehensive environmental solution, and he's a person with a plan for the future for dealing with climate change. He will actually be a real positive leader in this area, whereas our previous leader was a climate change denier and the only supporter of George Bush in opposing Kyoto. He'll be a leader in this area.
Right, you mentioned George Bush. It brings us naturally enough to Iraq. It's the pulling out of troops, not quite what it seems. 500, roughly speaking, 500 combat troops will go, but it'll still leave over 1,000, twice as many, 1,000 Australian troops on a security detail. Is that basically it?
That's not quite correct. The situation is they'll pull out all the combat troops. Australia has a lot of people involving support for the new government in Iraq. They'll stay, but the issue of actually the commitment to Iraq and putting troops in there was one Australians never supported, and they'll be going out as soon as practicable.
Paul Smith, thanks very much indeed for being with us.